Thank you for joining and welcome to a whole new build series. This is going to be my Thinline Telecaster. I'm going to dive straight into building this in a moment, and I'll talk as I work, and we'll have a bit of a chat through the history of the Thinline Tele because it's quite interesting. But we'll take a quick look at the wood first and then get started. So I've got some non-traditional woods, but I love them, and this is what I've decided to go for. So this is going to be the olive Thinline Tele. I'm going with an olive neck, an olive fretboard, and also an olive top. For the bodywood, I've got some really nice slabs of European white ash, which is lovely wood, but it's heavy as hell, so I have been waiting to use it on semi-hollow guitars, which is interestingly enough the same problem that Fender had. So let's get started and I'll talk a bit more about that. By the 60s, Fender had a problem. Their guitars were getting heavier. Ash that was light enough to make instruments was in short supply. They needed to do something about it. So in 1968, Fender commissioned a really talented luthier, a German luthier called Roger Rossmeisel, and asked him to design the Thinline Tele. Now, Roger really doesn't get much fanfare, but he was a really important luthier back then, and he had previously worked at Gibson and also Rickenbacker, and interestingly enough is the guy that we have to thank for the Rickenbacker 300 series. So he then designs the Thinline in 68, and by 69 it's in production with two single coils, just like the standard Tele. But then it wouldn't be till 3 years later in 72 that it then gets released with wide range humbuckers. And that then gives us the two Teles that we're probably all familiar with, which is the 69 single coil and the 72 with wide range humbuckers. There's been quite a few versions over the years, but those are the two we're probably all familiar with. And in case you're wondering, I'm just marking up where the carbon rods are going to go in this because it's a single piece neck, so I always pop carbon rods in just to give it some stability. So let's get the carbon rods in and the truss rod, and then we can start thinking about making this look like a neck. Okay, those are all in, they look great. I've got the neck shape marked out in tape, so let's go ahead and get this cut. So that's the neck shape and the headstock down to the final dimensions. The last bit I need to do just before I move on to the fretboard is to thickness the headstock. I'm not going to worry about this transition at the moment because I'll do that after the fretboard's on. Okay, that's as far as I'll go on the neck before getting the fretboard done. So first things first for the fretboard is to get a perfectly straight edge here so that I can measure all of my frets and nut position. This is going to be 22 frets, so let's go ahead and get it slotted. Let's trim it down to size and pop it on the neck. I've done a couple of small locating pins just on here. So I was having a think last night while waiting for this to dry, and I was thinking for this guitar perhaps maybe if I used humbuckers with no scratch plate and did a double binding, then I could put in the tone and volume and switch controls from the back, and that would look really nice, really clean. That would be cool. Let's get this flushed up and then we can radius and fret it. I think I'll get the transition done before I move on to radiusing, so let's do that now. I think a 12-inch radius will do nicely here. Okay. I do have to admit, I am sitting here talking myself into humbuckers as I'm thinking about it. Let's get some side dots on here, and then we can think about the frets. So that's the markers all installed. So I'm going to polish the fretboard up to 5000 now before I put the frets in. So I've just had an idea. I've got quite a few guitars that I'm planning to build over the next few months, and this was going to be just the neck building episode, and then I'll do another episode for the body and for the finish and so on. But I'm really enjoying this, and I don't want to stop to have to do some video editing and release an episode, so I think I'm just going to keep going and build the body, put it in this episode as well, and then for the next couple of builds I do, all of the building, so the neck and the bodies, will be in one video, and then the finishing onwards will be in the next video, so I'll do 2 videos per build. The nice thing about that is that there'll be lots of progress in each video, but I would like to know what your thoughts are on it, because if people hate the idea, then that's not something I'll do. Okay, next I'm just going to flush up all of the fret ends, and I'm going to put about a 5-degree bevel, no more than that, and then just roll each one of the fret ends individually. It's a much longer way of doing it, but that's one of the things you can spend time on if you're not manufacturing 100,000 guitars. That is such a nice point to get to. So I'll give you a quick look, and then we're going to crack on and start making the body. I don't know whether you can see that or not, but look at the grain and the colour. It's just awesome. I'm going to prep and glue the top first, and then while that's drying I can start working on the body. So that's flat and level and 38mm thick. So all I need to do now, this is the nicest side, so that's going to be the back, so I just need to transfer my template onto there, draw the centre line, transfer that to the other side and flip it over, and then I can work from the top. The outline's on here now, so I'm just going to go around and mark out where the hardware is going to sit, so I can come up with a plan for how much of this material I can take away. So I think the intelligent thing to do is to cut out the body, hug out those 2 bits before I decide whether to take some more out of here, because it does need to be heavy enough to stop the neck from diving. So that's the outline cut, and I've just gone round and roughly tidied it up on the spindle sander. I've also marked out where I'm going to take the majority of the material from. So I think the easiest way to do this will be to just take it to the drill press, hog most of it out with force and a bit, and then I can probably just freehand route it to tidy it all up. Now I'm going to pop the template over the top and decide where it looks prettiest. It's always nice to do this with the neck, because you can see exactly how the wood grain from the body is going to flow up into the fretboard. And I've got 2 really interesting bits of wood grain on the olive here which I'd like to keep, so I think that's where I want it. I do. I'm going to mark it up there. So let's get this glued on, and then it will start looking like a guitar. Okay, that hasn't moved at all. Wonderful. Let's get these edges cleaned up, and then we'll take a look. So we have something looking like a guitar for the first time, which is awesome. One of the things that's really nice about building your own guitars is that if there are bits that you don't like about an instrument like a Tele or something that's well known, you can just do what you want. And for me, F-holes is one of those things. I don't like the traditional F-holes, so I always like to do something a little bit different. I just think putting something in that follows the lines of the body is just a nicer way of doing the guitar. So next I want to get the neck pocket done and just have the neck fitted, and it's all downhill from there. Yeah, let's do that. So that is basically right there. Now it's a little bit tighter. It would go in if I forced it in, but I don't want to do that because it'd be too tight. But I wrapped a couple of bits of masking tape around the inside of the neck pocket template just to make sure that I didn't route a sloppy neck pocket. So I think what I'll do is literally just take a couple of minutes sanding here, and that should slot in nicely. That looks dead on to me. But that will get a tiny bit looser as I take the neck in and pull it out, but then we're going to have some finish going on it, so that's exactly how I want it. So we just need to check the neck pocket depth is correct now, so I'm going to get the bridge and I'm going to run a straight edge along the neck. What I'm looking for is when the bridge saddles are at their lowest position or just off the deck, that the straight edge meets the front of the saddle about a millimetre, just under a millimetre beneath where the string's going to sit, because what that means is when I've got the action at a nice low height of about 1.5 millimetres or a little bit less, the saddles will be just off the deck, so they won't be jacked up to get a decent action. It'll be nice and low. You might take a look at this and say for a Fender that's a really deep neck pocket because it's about 19 millimetres, just under 19 millimetres. And it is, but that's because I'm using a hip shot bridge, because I'm going to use humbuckers, and that's a good couple of millimetres lower than a traditional Fender one. I have just checked that the neck is straight, by the way. And it's the outside E strings that we're interested in, because the others will all be raised up anyway to match the radius. So that is... that's absolutely dead on. Which is great, I don't need to deepen the neck pocket. I've done quite a few of these using exactly the same ratios and frets and bridge, so it's not that much of a surprise, but it's nice to not have to redo anything. So now I can think about getting the sides completely smooth, they're pretty much there anyway, and getting the binding on. I've got a celluloid white pearl binding. In fact, I'm going to do a double binding on this one, and both celluloid and ABS both dissolve in acetone, so that's the method that I'm going to use to bond it onto this body. And the secret to a really great binding job is to have everything perfectly fitted before you do any bonding at all. So just a quick tip for the binding, I'm not pulling it tight as I go, I'm actually just pushing it into the guitar, and where I have these curves, the inside curves, I'm actually going to push the binding a little bit back on itself to make sure it pushes right into there and then tape it. So what I found with 25.5-inch scale length guitars is that if I pop the bridge exactly where it should be, you almost always end up intonating backwards. What I'm going to do is, the scale length in millimetres is 64.8 millimetres, but I'm going to mark the bridge on 65 millimetres, and that's where I'm going to have the centre of travel for the saddles. So let's get the bridge and the string through holes done first, because that's the harder bit. And then we'll get to the pickup cavities and controls. So it's probably worth showing you just how I'm going to do this, because some people, if they're doing it for the first time, might find it a bit daunting. So I've wound one of the saddles back as far as it will go and the other one is forward as far as it will go. So the distance right in the middle of these two, from there to the front of the bridge, is exactly how far forward of the scale length line, I need to line the bridge up, and that will mean that the centre of travel is exactly on my scale length line, or the line to which I've drawn the scale length, which is a couple of millimetres back. Now that the pickup cavities are out, I'm going to do a mock-up of the hardware just so that I can decide where I want the tone and volume and the switch to be, because that's going to be the next thing that I need to do. Okay, the holes are drilled all the way through. I'm just popping my pots and switch into those holes so that when I put my template over, which is what I'm going to use to route the cavity, I can check that everything is sitting exactly where I want it. That way I'm not going to have any surprises. That's where I want it, so let's take these out and draw that on. What I like about drilling all the way through is that there's no measuring and translating those measurements onto the back of the guitar. It's one more error that or potential error that you can eliminate. That's the recess for the plate. So that's the wiring channels done. I'm happy with all of those. So now let's position and pop the hole in here for the jack socket. Okay, subject to lots and lots of sanding, that's the body done. So I can just get this heel marked and move on to a bit I love doing, which is carving the neck. First up is just to get the taper, or the thickness of the neck. So with the taper done, I can just remark my fret positions that I can use as reference points to measure the facets for the carve. Okay, a bit of sanding to tidy up, and then we can take a look at it. Okay, that is the woodworking part of this build finished. And I have to say, oh, I haven't done this. Okay, I'm happy with that. Sorry, I haven't shown you. The white ash body keeps everything nice and bright. And I'll show you the neck heel, because I did a non-traditional Telecaster neck heel. Let's see whether you can see it. That's one of the things I think you can always improve when you make your own Tele or Strat or your own bolt-on, is just to taper and shape the heel into the body nicely. So things I'm happy with and things I need to be conscious of then for finishing and putting the hardware on this guitar. The sound hole I love the design of, and the overall light feel to the guitar is exactly what I wanted. There is quite a bit of wood grain going on in the guitar, so what I do need to do is to be conscious of that when I put the hardware in. So I think what I'm going to do is to make that all the same colour, probably in chrome, just to keep the whole thing looking fairly clean. And at the moment I'm thinking a high gloss finish is probably the way to go. But that will be for the next episode. So the next thing I've got to do is to do the finish sanding and assembly of my rosewood single cut guitar that I put up a few weeks ago, and I'll tell you all about the problems that I had with the finish on that guitar, but it's totally self-induced. And then while I put the finish on this one and leave it to cure, which I'll do in the next few days, I've got another build to start, which is going to be a semi-hollow walnut guitar. So if you're going to be interested in that, it will be up after my rosewood finishing episode. So if you've laboured this far, thank you very much. I do really appreciate your support, and I do really appreciate all of the comments. I get to all of them. So let me know what you think, and hopefully I'll have another episode soon.